Okay, so, yeah, thanks Dan and Whitney and Ishmael for inviting me, welcoming me into this conversation, and bring me to all here in Seattle. As mentioned, I come from New York City. I live in Washington Heights. That's uptown Manhattan, if anyone knows where it is. And I am family to the world's two most photogenic kitties. And if you want to see the Instagram, I will show you. I'm sure you'll agree. Yeah, and thanks to the Seattle Foundation and King County and all the other sponsors and groups that made this possible. So I really appreciate the opportunity, and the chance to talk to you all about what it is I do, what I've been writing about, a little bit of what I've been writing about over the past 8-ish years. So yeah, we're going to talk about America's Next Top Model. There's going to be a lot of models in this conversation, and you're going to see there's going to be one winner. I mean, there's not really one winner. You'll see how there's there's a lot of models out there, but we'll see how maybe there really is only one. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Next City, just so you know where I'm coming from, how we get to do this work. So Next City, we are, as Dan mentioned, an independent online not-for-profit publication. We were founded in 2003, and our founders were profiled in 2003 in the New York Times. So this is a little story by the New York Times about our founders, and a profile of who they were and why they started this publication. They were urban planning students at Yale University, and they graduated. And as they were kind of moving on to the next stages of their careers, they wanted to form this magazine because in 2003. If some of you may recall, this was still the time of the cities are full of pollution and crime and drugs, and this is where all the problems in the world are coming from, is from cities. When actually there was a reason why the world, since 2003, has become majority urban, because people are moving to cities for all different kinds of reasons, some of which are good, some of which are not so good. But the point is, cities aren't just places where there are problems; there are places where there are solutions. And one of the things that our founders we definitely still take from them is the idea that top-down planning is not good. I'll just leave it at that. So since then, we've evolved. The conversation has evolved. The dialogue has evolved, right? So cities are now places where everybody wants to be, and now over time we've come to focus more and more on those neighborhoods, those communities historically disinvested, redlined, immigrant communities that they're the ones still often seen as the places where there's crime and drugs and pollution. And yes, there is pollution, but there shouldn't be. But there's a reason why those are the neighborhoods, right? So we focus on those communities and their ideas, what their vision is. There's this idea in journalism called movement journalism that's been brewing over the past couple of years, that talks about prioritizing news and perspectives of historically oppressed communities. We're also part of the Solutions Journalism Network. So this is the idea that journalists shouldn't just be reporting on problems, we should also be reporting on responses to the problems. And in the Solutions Journalism Network, they keep a database of solutions journalism stories that they curate and kind of decide whether it is solutions journalism or not. There are these 4 pillars that kind of decide that kind of make up solutions journalism. So in that database, the rankings of outlets for how many stories they've done since 2011, when the network got started, how many stories have they done that are solutions journalism stories? The rankings are 1 New York Times, 2 Next City, 3 NPR, and 4 The Guardian. So that's who we are. These are my colleagues. At Next City, there's, as you can see, there's not 11. Yeah, there's 11. I studied economics. I swear there's 11 up there. And we're actually growing. We're actually hiring for 2 new reporters right now. A little bit about my work. So again, just so you know where I'm coming from. When I started at Next City in 2015, one of the things I did was I started informally tracking the demographics of my sources. Because when they offered me the job and I accepted, the second thought after, the second thought was, oh my gosh, wait, I'm going to be reporting about economic development in historically disinvested communities. I need to know for myself, does my reporting reflect the communities that I'm reporting about? The sources, the people that I quote, do they look like, sound like the folks that I'm most concerned about. And so I started tracking, and you can sort of see over time that it's gradually becoming more and more people of color. I mean, it started off almost a majority at the beginning. And, as you can see, there's, about 20-ish% of the sources I quoted in 2022 were white men. I got some token white men in there. They're doing some great work. One of them is around here. I don't know if he's around here, this room today, but some of you must know Matthew Richter, right? Oh, one of my favorite token white men. Really great. All right. So, Dan and when they approached me and called, and we first talked, and when it came to like commercial affordability, I responded. I said, it's not really just commercial affordability that we write about, or that I write about. It's really community-owned or controlled real estate or finance. Communities. It's not just about the price. It's at this point. That's definitely part of it, but it's also who owns it, who decides who gets to be in that storefront, who decides what that warehouse gets, what gets to be in that warehouse. Is it going to be a data center? Is it going to be local artists? Is it going to be a bar or a club that reflects the culture of the surrounding neighborhood? Maybe I don't know. And the point is, so the reason we write about it at Next City is, like I said, you saw in my sources, the people and communities we're interested in covering. This is what they're doing. It's not just making the real estate affordable or trying to figure out a way. I mean, you heard this morning, it takes subsidy, it takes low interest loans, it takes all kinds of things because we're working against the grain, right? We're working against the usual, business as usual, corporate, white male invested, white male owned. We're working against all of that. So it's going to be hard. It's going to take subsidy. But not only that, at this point, and you hear a little bit about why in the rest of the presentation, about why it also matters that the ownership and the control resides in the communities that are usually ignored by the forces of economic development and investment. And where are these places? Okay, so this is a bunch. I've written over 550 stories over the past 8 years, and this is only 20, right? I swear, I studied economics. There's 20 up there. 5 times 4, right? Yeah, 20. Okay. So, and some of these may be familiar to you. There's Africatown Community Land Trust up in the Central District, Cultural Space Agency, and the groups they've been working with. I think we'll hear from them later. And then there's some that are close by, like East Portland Community Investment Trust, East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. Noni Session is here. Noni and I have had the great honor of becoming great friends with Noni over the years, and you'll hear from her later. And they're all over, places big and small, big cities, small cities. Traverse City, it's only 15,000 people in Traverse City, which means, guess what? Their real estate cooperative in Common Grounds, that cooperative can get USDA financing because it's a city of 15,000, and it's not in a larger metropolitan area. So they can get USDA guaranteed low interest financing for a cooperative because guess what? The USDA knows what cooperatives are and has been lending to them for decades in rural areas. And so there's this community-owned real estate project in Traverse City that has that financing. And you see other places too. It's not just the real estate, it's also the money, right? So we have some credit union examples in Brooklyn, Hope Credit Union in the Mississippi Delta, from Memphis to New Orleans. In North Dakota, you have the only state-owned bank in the country, the Bank of North Dakota. Ask me about it sometime. And some of these are very old, right? Bank of North Dakota is more than 100 years old, 1919. I'll tell you a little bit about this Wing on Woe, this shop in Chinatown. It's been there. It's been on that stretch of Mott Street in Chinatown for more than 100 years. It's been in this building since 1925. And some of them are much newer, right? And you can sort of see, right? So let me just come back to this for a second because we were talking about scale earlier. So I wanted to say, Aparna mentioned equity doesn't scale. In some ways, equity doesn't scale. But let me just tell you that these are all community real estate projects in different cities across the country. You've got a bunch here. There's some that there's not even up here, right? Like I don't have SeaTac up here. We wrote a story about SeaTac. I'm sorry I didn't get them up here, but I couldn't have 3 Seattles up here. I had 2 already. Okay, so the scale. So the more and more this starts to happen, what does that does that look like? Does that look like scaling out to you? These are all community-owned or controlled real estate or finance models, examples, right? And let me just tell you. Let me go to another way of thinking about scale. There are 4,230 community banks out there across the country. Community banks generally less than $2 billion in assets, focusing on 1 or 2 metropolitan areas. Community banks, 4,230. Collectively, as a group, they do more commercial real estate lending than the big 4 banks combined, right? The big 4 banks, Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citi. They've got 50% of the deposits, but those 4,230 community banks do more commercial real estate lending than those 4 banks combined, right? Is that scale? So we're going to talk about I'm going to talk through some of these examples to give you a flavor of why are they doing community-owned real estate, and really just to go through some of these barriers that they've had to face, and give you a sense of what the pattern is, what the different models are, and maybe why they chose these different models. But it really doesn't matter in the end. You'll see why, right? Okay, so let me start here in Chinatown. So in Chinatown, Wing On Wo, this shop has been on this stretch of Mott Street for more than 100 years. It's been in this building since 1925. The Lum family came to own this building eventually, so they still own this building today. And Mei Lum, she was coming back from China, from a trip to China. She was thinking about going to grad school, and the family was going to sell the business. And she had this moment to reflect and think, oh my gosh, I can't let this go, right? What's going to happen to this neighborhood? This place is so special to the neighborhood that it's been here 100 years, still selling the same cultural goods, porcelain goods imported from China. The customers live upstairs. The customers are in the neighborhood. Is it community owned and controlled? I mean, it's one business owner, one family that owns it, but that business depends on the Chinese community, immigrant community around them. They live upstairs. The community lives upstairs. They buy from the store. There's accountability there, but it's not that robust, right? Like at any point, you could lose it. Actually, around the corner from here is another building where the Chinatown ice cream factory is. Used to be owned by the family that runs the ice cream factory. They cashed out maybe 6 or 7 years ago because speculators are coming in. Chinatown, if you know Manhattan, if you know New York City, Chinatown is right near the financial district, right near Soho, right near the Lower East Side. Lots of real estate speculation, and prices and values are going up. And they cashed out. They did manage to get the buyer to agree to keep the factory in there, but they lost control of the building. But at least they're still in. The Chinatown ice cream factory is still there. And if it's gone, you'll know, because you'll read about me burning the building down. Okay. So, but it's not very robust, right? So here's another example, right? So this is in the Bronx. This is where we are in the Bronx, right? So I'm just showing you where it is in New York City. You've got Manhattan, you've got Queens down there, a little bit of Brooklyn, and there's the Bronx up there, right? And you see a little marker, okay. So this grocery store has been in this community for more than 50 years. In 1968, a gentleman named Enrique Caro was running this grocery store, and he got a loan from Ponce Bank for $20,000 to buy the building. $20,000, 1968, not bad, right? Ponce Bank, founded in 1960 by a group of Puerto Rican business and civic leaders in the Bronx. It's 1960. The Bronx is burning, right? It's been redlined. It's been falling to pieces. Nobody wants it except for the folks who live there. Guess what? They wanted it. And guess what? They started a bank. Ponce Bank is chartered as a mutual bank, which is an older form of bank ownership. It's similar to a credit union, but it's a for-profit, and it pays taxes. And it's a mutual bank, so it can do a lot more commercial lending than most credit unions typically do. And this is what it's founded to do, to give loans to small businesses and other folks in the neighborhood to own pieces of the neighborhood, like this grocery store. $20,000 from Ponce Bank to Enrique Caro to buy this building in 1968. Fast forward, Enrique Caro retires in the early 90s, sells the business to the Sanchez family. Actually, not the Sanchez family, he's Julio's brother-in-law. Sells it to Julio's brother-in-law in the early 90s. Keeps the building to himself. So they're paying rent to the Caro family. The Sanchez and his brother-in-law are paying rent to the Caro family in the South Bronx. And as Julio says here, he's always like joking with the landlord, like, yeah, I'm going to buy the building eventually. This is Julio, right? So fast forward to 2021, Enrique Caro passes away. Now the family wants to sell the building. Julio's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And fortunately, the family remembers, Enrique promised to sell you the building, so we'll give it to you for $1.5 million. Where are you going to get $1.5 million, Julio? Oh, right? But guess what? Where did he get it? He walked down the street to the modern-day headquarters of Ponce Bank. The same bank loans him $1.1 million to buy the building. The same bank. The loan officer grew up in the Bronx, grew up in public housing, looks at a grocery store, walks around and says, I know this grocery store. I mean, I didn't live in this neighborhood, but there's thousands of these all over New York City. This business model has been here for years. This grocery store has been here for 50 years. 50 years. They can pay back $1 million. They can, you can see and yes, there are some issues with like, oh, is his financing not right? Does he need to fix his accounting and his books? Yes, it took a couple months of technical assistance working with the bank, but they figured it out because the bank knows, the loan officer knows, and the board of the bank knows, oh yeah, these grocery stores, community depends on these grocery stores, right? Look at the front of that store. You can I don't know if you can tell, but there's like boxes and boxes of fresh fruits and vegetables in front there, right? Okay? Ponce Bank. What happens to the next generation, right? I don't know. So communities are looking for something more robust, right? So let me take you to the close by East Portland. So this started out as a conversation, right? So where are we? We're in the far, far east edge of Portland, right? This actually used to be outside the city limits for a while, but now it's inside the city limits. And it started out as a conversation. The community was looking for ways to save and invest. Banks didn't want to give them bank accounts. There's a lot of Somali and Eritrean immigrants and Eastern European immigrants in this part of Portland. Folks that are having trouble getting bank accounts and not sure about the stock market. And, it's a working class, low income community, so there's a lot of folks out there who are trying to sell them scams, get rich quick scams, crypto, we're talking, right? This is not that long ago. They're trying to do this, and Mercy Corps, a nonprofit based in Portland, they have a local office too, Mercy Corps Northwest. Mercy Corps is trying to help these folks save and invest, and the community said, hey, can you help us buy property, a building? We're all familiar with it from our countries of origin. Everyone knows land, buildings, wealth matters, right? Help us buy a building. And they figure it out, and I'll say a little more about how they did it, but they eventually created this thing called Community Investment Trust. It's really just an LLC. And they created this class called Moving from Owing to Owning. You go through the class, teaches you about saving and investing and financial literacy and whatever you want to call it. You go through the class, and now you're eligible to invest and become an owner of Plaza 122. And actually, I forgot to say, you have to live in one of the 4 zip codes around the property to be eligible to become an owner. Okay, so the neighborhood where it is, the residents nearby coming to own this property. And what does it look like today? Look, it's beautiful. It's hard to tell, but there's 30,000 square feet in here. There's besides the ground floor retail, there's offices underneath the entire thing. It's really massive. It's kind of weird almost. And what do you have? Well, of course there's a barber shop or a hair salon, right? And on the side of the hair salon, or the barber shop, you see this little poster over here. This tells you who owns the building. They're from the neighborhood. Who are they? I don't actually speak Spanish, so I don't know what this first investor is saying, but her name's Joanna. She's from the neighborhood. Of course, you have to be an investor in this thing. The second investor down here, Elizabeth. So this is her food truck or food cart, right? It's a burrito cart. Really good burritos. Had the honor of purchasing some myself, but it's really great. And she was working in a nonprofit. She quit her day job to run this thing because it was doing so well. And actually, if you go there now, she's not there because now she has a brick and mortar spot. Not in the plaza because they were full up. They had no space. But she found another spot nearby. She's still an investor. And actually, this parking lot is in the back of the plaza. They're turning it into a food truck plaza with a movie screen because, why not? Of course. And again, it's not just individual level stories, right? So here's a little more about the impact as of November of last year. So we have 319 investors from the neighborhood. Several of them are starting to cash out. They're cashing out their shares in the ownership, and they're using it for down payments on homes, for cars, for their business. Elizabeth used a little bit of the equity share she cashed out. She used for her business. They're getting dividends, so they're accruing dividends paid out annually. They can also cash out. The shares go up in price. 74,000 cashed out so far from 45 investors, and you can see 85 resubscription. It means 85% of that 45 investors that after they cash out, they keep the auto pay going on their buying back of shares because you can buy in shares $10 a month, $25, $50 a month. So they cash out the shares, and then you're just like, no, we're just keep the program going. I'm going to keep buying shares in this property. You see some of the demographics of the investors down there. 52% first-time investors, 61% women, 67% low-income households. This is becoming a thing, right? Here's a little bit of how they did it, right? So here's not a crazy capital stack, actually. And the developer equity came from cash from Mercy Corps, and there was an impact investor. One impact investor happened to be a wealthy intern who was working at Mercy Corps that summer when they started to talk about this, and just happened to have some family wealth. He put it into the project, and that was able to get them an acquisition loan from Beneficial State Bank. This is a CDFI certified bank. It's based in Oakland, but they have an office in Portland as well. The acquisition loan and the equity. The reason you can get the acquisition loan pretty easy is because when they first targeted the property for acquisition, it was 60% leased up, so it was income generating. It's one of the limitations on this model, is you do need for that acquisition loan and later for this refinancing letter of credit. I'll tell you how that works. You do need income generation on the property, right? 60% leased up when they bought it. Now it's 98% leased up. It's probably 100% by now. There's a Somali-owned taxi cab company based in there. Several community-based organizations. There's a statewide trans youth advocacy organization that's based in this building. Okay, so how the heck do you sell shares to the community, right? There's securities compliance. There's all SEC regulations. All this stuff. Well, yeah, it turns out Mercy Corps got some lawyers in the room, and they figured out, they were reading this thing. So this is the Securities Act of 1933. This is the same act that tech companies use to raise startup capital for their companies. You guys familiar with the tech industry in Seattle? Yes. So this is the law that they use to raise their startup capital shares. And it turns out there's a little section here, Section 3A, Paragraph 2, I guess, or whatever you call it. It has this thing that says if you have a security issued or guaranteed by the bank, by any bank, you can sell those shares to people in-state, investors in-state, for no minimum investment. They don't have to be accredited. Accredited means you have to be wealthy, right? You have to be worth $1 million or earn $250,000 for the past 3 years to be an accredited investor. So we're talking non-accredited investors. This is how you sell. This is how you sell shares in a building, commercial real estate property, to people in a low-income neighborhood. This is how you do it. Letter of credit, basically they refinance their acquisition loan from Beneficial State Bank with a longer-term permanent mortgage from Northwest Bank, based in Idaho, but they have an office in Portland. And they do this letter of credit thing. Usually it has to do with like international trade. But they figured out that this works. It basically means it's like a little line of credit on top of the mortgage. And it provides both the security exemption guarantee requirement, it satisfies that, and it functions as the buyback vehicle. So when those 45 investors, when they want to cash out their shares, you can cash out anytime. And the letter of credit effectively serves as the line of credit to allow the entity, Plaza 122, to buy out your shares. And there's a limit to how much they can buy out at any one time, but that limit goes up because every time they revalue the building, they increase the size of the letter of credit, and so it allows more and more investors to get bought out over time. Okay, all right. I know we have a lot of time, so I'm just going to rush through these because there's a lot. By the way. This is a building in Albany, New York. Same exact model, legal model. They're using the same exact securities exemption. They didn't need a wealthy impact investor. There was one CDFI that said, we got the cash, we're going to buy the building, and we're going to do the refinance and letter of credit thing. We're going to sell the shares of the building to the community and effectively buy out the CDFI. The investor, the community investors in Portland have already bought out Mercy Corps technically because they bought back the shares, the ownership. So this is going to happen in Albany, New York. There's maybe 8 to 10 other cities now that are talking to the folks in Portland about bringing this model to their city. This is Albany, New York. It's a beautiful building. If you're ever in Albany, I'll tell you where it is. All right. This is another model, right? Okay, we're breezing through these models, right? Noni session, you're here, you'll hear about it later. This is Esther's Orbit Room. This is the former Harlem of the Bay Area. Harlem of the West. The music. This used to be the place. When Noni and I were going on a walking tour through this building earlier this year or last year, and mailman from across the street comes and says, "Hey, this is my day job, but I'm a jazz musician because my dad was a jazz musician and he played in this building when I was growing up, and he would take me in there as a kid, just to hang out. And Noni's walking by when she's growing up." Just hanging out. This is the place, right? And they're creating this crazy. Here's where it is in Oakland, by the way. So this is at the far west edge of Oakland. Okay. Esther's Orbit Room. The Esther's closed in 2009, 2010. And when they closed in 2010, they thought they were going to reopen pretty soon, so they just wrapped the bottles in cellophane and rubber bands and left them like this. Oh my gosh! I'm just realizing you can see Noni and I right there in the mirror. Didn't realize that before. Anyway, so what is the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative? So it started out as a conversation. The people of Colorado Sustainable Housing Network, also known as POSHN, they got together with the Sustainable Economies Law Center, which is a bunch of I would say recovering securities lawyers in the Bay Area. And Janelle Orsi is one of the co-founders of the Sustainable Economies Law Center. And POSHN comes in and says, hey, these developers are buying up properties, trying to rent them out at ridiculous prices we can't afford. We don't understand who are they marketing these things to, these condos or these storefronts or whatever it is. What can we do about it? We don't have individual wealth to be able to buy and compete with all that. So what can we do? And lawyers at Sustainable Economies Law Center were like, Janelle specifically was like, I was just thinking about this problem. And we just passed this law in California to expand the power of the cooperative corporation law to allow us to, these are pages from the bylaws of East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. I shit you not, these are actual bylaws with cartoons in them to explain what's going on here, right? Can you see these cartoons? Yeah. So what it is it's a multi-stakeholder cooperative. It's about 600 members, right? And about 350 of them are investor members. Some of them have invested as little as $1,000 paid out in like $10 a month installments. Some of them have invested $500,000. And here's the capital stack for Esther specifically. And Tiffany Brown, this is a Cordata Capital. So this is an anti-capitalist financial advisory firm. Yes, they exist, and this is not the only one. Tiffany Brown and her clients, so it's not Tiffany's money, it's Tiffany's clients' money that she's moved into EV Prec as part of the investment. And This moment she's talking about where EB-Prec is signaling their legit, viable investment opportunity, this is when EB-Prec mailed out its first dividend checks last year. Yeah, that's right. An anti-capitalist, decommodification-focused real estate cooperative sent out dividend checks in the same year that Bitcoin fell apart, or crypto fell apart, right? Everyone's thinking crypto is a great investment. Poof, there goes your money. This, paying back dividends, right? Some of those checks are very small, but it's meaningful. Oh, and I forgot to say too, those investors that have invested $3.5 million so far, so 1.25 for esters, but 3.5 million in the cooperative, right? Those investors, EB-Prec offered them anywhere from 0 to 4% interest. You could choose 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Half of them chose 0, right? And even when they called around and said, "Here, you want a dividend check," some of them said, "Yeah, you know what? Just keep it. Just roll it right back into the cooperative." And this is another shot of the inside of esters, right? So that's a model. Okay, here's another model. You saw the picture. This is E.G. Wood. So this also started out as a conversation. So there are a few small business owners in Englewood on the south side of Chicago. So you can see the little marker here. We're about 4 or 5-ish miles south of downtown on the south side. Englewood, historically black, all the things. Redlined, urban renewal, they came and cleared out some of these disinvested, vacant commercial properties. This was a liquor store for a while. There was a carry-out for a while. Nothing worked out. But there were small business owners in the neighborhood who were like, "We love this neighborhood." SUNY Powell had a barber shop across the street for a while until there was some violence that happened there, and he had to shut it down. But he became co-founder. So these small businesses were like, "Okay, let's apply to the city's tax increment financing programs. There's various ways, TIF dollars. You can apply. The city of Chicago puts them out in various ways, and they're like, let's apply for them. They either didn't get them or they got them, and then they couldn't find a building that they could buy with the TIF dollars that they got. And so when all these conversations about the frustrations with the city's tax increment financing system, and if you think you got it bad where you are, I don't know how bad has Washington. Do we have TIFs here? I don't really have TIFs here.
We just started.
You just started. Okay. Well, watch out. Because let me tell you, in Chicago, just Chicago, there's like 150 TIF districts, more than all the other cities combined. TIF districts in Chicago pull in $1 billion a year. In 2022, I just read they pulled in $2 billion. Okay? And what's the city doing with all the money? Okay, some of it they were trying to give to small businesses on the south side of Chicago. It didn't work out for different reasons, one of which is the reimbursement thing. They're like, oh, here's an award, $250,000 in TIF dollars. You got to spend the money and then we'll reimburse you. Oh. So guess what? You can't spend the money you don't have, so you lose out when you put in an offer on the building and you can't buy a building. All right, so these small businesses, 5 or 6 of them, got together and said, let's apply and let's create this E.G. Wood collective. We'll apply together, and we'll use some of those same securities exemptions to sell shares to our community and ourselves too, as businesses. We'll raise a little bit of money up front to actually get one of these projects started. You want to talk about a long runway? This photo is from 2019. This is 2 years into construction, right? See the bricks at the top? That's actually new. Like they rehabbed that from before. So this is 2 years into construction in 2019 when I got to visit. All right. Community, $250,000 invested into the cooperative. Get some of the upfront capital to get going. In Chicago, the CDFIs are often serving as bridge lenders to get you to the TIF. If you can get the CDFI to give you the dollars, it's hard. Especially if you're trying to do this as a collective, a new cooperatively owned thing. And you're like, what are you? But they figured it out. Let's figure it out. This is Megan Hart talking about, the executive director of List Chicago talking about, it was hard to figure out, but you know what, they did it. Credit to Lisk, they did it. Not only did they eventually become the bridge lender and the permanent lender to E.G. Wood, they even changed their lending rules nationally, because they were like, why should we charge them higher risk just because of the neighborhood they're in? After after making this loan, LISC wiped away its risk-based pricing. Used to be risk-based pricing. I don't know if you remember, but if you've seen those term sheets recently, there's no more level 1, 2, 3, 4 risk. That's all gone, thanks to this project. All right. So, we're still not there yet, right? Because what else is the problem? The market. You want to talk about how the market is rigged against some of these projects? So E.G. Wood had the TIF dollars. They won the grant. They had the TIF dollars. They had LISC working with them. They had enough money to buy some of these buildings. No one was calling them back, or they weren't picking up the phone. The brokers, the owners, the phone numbers on the sides of the buildings disconnected. Couldn't find anybody. Oh, but thank goodness, there's the Cook County Land Bank Authority. The Cook County Land Bank Authority had purchased a tax lien on this building, and in Chicago, the Cook County Land Bank Authority has the ability to extinguish property tax debt. So they bought the tax lien debt. They have the power to extinguish it, and they know that E.G. Wood wants to work on a building on 63rd Street in Englewood. And so finally, the land bank calls the owner and says, hey, look, if you don't pay these property taxes, we will take this building from you. You will get nothing. And we'll give this building to E.G. Wood. Or you can call back E.G. Wood. So the guy's not stupid. He called back E.G. Wood. He got paid a price, market-ish rate for this building that was under a tax lien. And so at least E.G. Wood finally got the building. There's also a little lot in front of me between me and the building that was also already acquired by the land bank. That also became part of the E.G. Wood project. And fast forward to 2022, and here we are. That same hole in the building. Now it's a 3-story window. Right? You back up a little bit here. And the land bank loves this thing. This is like exactly it. This is what we were designed to do. Right? So there's a little green space over here. Here's the inside. Here's the inside of the building. This is on the 3rd floor where Nanette Tucker has her consignment shop. Her consignment shop that she's been looking for a space for this consignment shop for like 6 or 7 years. She's seen consignment shops work on the north side of Chicago. She's like, this could work on the south side. We got stuff down here. Not only is it a consignment shop, it's also what do you call it? An atelier or a studio. She's got a little room where she teaches women from the community to do what she does, which is she takes old clothes that are beat up and not wearable, and she turns them into hats and bags and skirts and other things. And this is her space now. This is what it looks like every day around sunset. Right? Here's the ribbon cutting. So Dion Lucas is the architect in the middle in the turquoise. His architecture firm is on the bottom floor. SUNY Powell, the barber you saw earlier, he's got most of the ground floor, and then the consignment shops was on the second floor. I mentioned the Reg D, the private offering, friends and family round. They got the TIF deal. LISC was the main lender, has been the main lender. And also a lot of sweat equity into this thing, because what else is there? And also it's pretty meaningful for the entrepreneurs themselves to be working on the building, painting here and there, maybe doing some of the early cleanup, pulling out old bricks so that they can put the bricklayers can put the new bricks in, that kind of thing. In the gray suit, so Dion Lucas is in the middle in the turquoise. Nanette Tucker, she's got the consignment shop upstairs. She's in the beige long jacket to Dion to the left of Dion, to behind Nanette. So that in the gentleman in the suit, that's Maurice Cox, the planning director for Chicago at the time. And Maurice Cox tells me, because of this project, we're changing how we do TIFs and other development subsidies in the city. We're going to start to put out some of those dollars up front, which is how E.G. Wood bought its second building, a couple of blocks over. Acquisition money was the TIF dollars provided. Some of it was provided up front. So they're working on the second building. It's going to be a bunch of food businesses in this building. All right. We're breezing through. Okay. All right. Also, I forgot to give you my disclaimer. I'm not a banker. Never have I ever been a banker, or economic development or affordable housing professional. I just play one on the internet. And so now I'm playing one in front of you. All right. Okay. So Kensington Corridor Trust. Where are we? This is Crystal Ortiz, by the way. She's the first tenant for the Kensington Corridor Trust. Where are they working? They're working, you can see the little market of Kensington. It's in the northeast part of Philadelphia. And it's not in northeast Philadelphia, but it's northeast of Center City, where you can see here. Kensington, also known as the opioid crisis capital of the Philadelphia region, or the epicenter of the opioid crisis in the region. This is what most of it looks like today. And yes, it's fell in hard times for all the reasons we can all imagine: redlining, disinvestment, deindustrialization. But evidence like this mural here, not the only mural along this corridor. Philadelphia is the city of murals. Every single neighborhood in Philadelphia has at least 3 murals. I'm probably lowballing it too. Even this neighborhood, okay? So what starts to happen? You see this developer shift capital, raising capital from program-related investments, from foundations, impact investors, trying to say, let's go into the hardest neighborhood in Philadelphia to work in, this one, and we're going to try to use the real estate as a force for good. And they do, and Brian's pretty slick. He's a smart guy, and he's pretty good at giving a PowerPoint presentation, and raises a bunch of money and starts buying up properties and rehabbing them, legitimately rehabbing them, like this one. And the neighborhood says to him, hey, did you notice what's happening to the rest of the neighborhood while you're doing this? I mean, besides the opioid crisis, what's happening is suddenly landlords nearby are like, hey, we can charge $2,500 for this 1 bedroom. Yeah, in this neighborhood, $2,500 for a 1 bedroom. And that's like 2 years ago when I looked at that. Okay. And Brian's like, yeah, you know what? That's really messed up. Instead of saying, you're crazy, instead of saying, I can't do anything about that, Brian says, that's messed up, and let me see what I can do. Let me talk to the foundations who already gave me money, and let me see if I can get them to fund this trust. And the trust is a community entity. It has a board from the community. I have a quote from a board member here. Oh yeah, John Chun is his family's owned this restaurant on this corridor for like 30 or 40 years now. He's a board member. But anyway, they stand up this trust, and they start transferring properties into it. Some of them are vacant, and the trust is even buying properties from Shift after they've been rehabbed. And this is their community organizing space, their offices basically, right along the corridor. That street I just showed you is right outside those windows. And what is it? It's a bi-entity model. There's a perpetual purpose trust. You guys this is Seattle. You've heard of Patagonia? Anyone heard of Patagonia? They did the fancy purpose trust thing. Yeah, same thing here, all right? They created a purpose trust to serve the community. It has bylaws and everything. And there's also a 501c3 separate from that raises the grants to do the organizing and the property management work, right? They got 15 properties acquired. This is Crystal, the waxery, the first picture I showed you from this trust that's right next door. This is another building that they bought from Shift Capital that they're rehabbing now. Actually, this photo is from like a year ago, and right now there is an African braiding salon moving in here as we speak. And there's a vacant lot next door. You can see that's the first full construction project for the Kensington Corridor Trust that they're getting through the permitting process now. Adriana, the executive director here, she started as a community organizer in Camden, came over to Kensington, and they hired her over here. In Camden has seen Adriana's family has been displaced by speculative real estate investment in Camden. So she came over here and said, I see exactly what's going on, and I can't believe that this job exists. You need a community organizer to lead a real estate operation. And Adriana's been very insistent on this 2% rush. She says it, 2% or no. Also, if you can give 2%, but you want to see it on the board, no. They spent a year working through their governance model with community members. You're not getting a seat on their board. It's 2% or no. So far, it's only been program-related investments from smaller foundations. Some are local. Katali Foundation, which also funded EB-Prec in Oakland, also funding this. Organizing operations currently depend on grant funding. The foundations will often give on both sides. They'll give operating grants for the nonprofit, and then they'll give a low-interest 2%, 1%, 0% loan to the trust to acquire the properties. Okay? Moving along, because we don't have a lot of time. So this is the Boston Gema project. Okay, this one. Here's another conversation. Boston Gema is working in Roxbury. This is the red outlined area, kind of in the middle bottom there. Roxbury, Jamaica Plain. You can kind of see it. I know the writing's hard to see. Is Jamaica Plain and Dorchester. So that area of Boston. This is the predominantly Black or Latino part of Boston, right? Besides East Boston, but anyway, that's where they're working. And there was a conversation. I heard you guys may have talked with Aaron Tanaka not that long ago. So there was a conversation coming back from a conference. So there were formerly incarcerated individuals, plus Aaron and a few others, coming back from a conference talking about, hey, we just won this great victory, banning the box in Massachusetts. Now we were supposed to get all these jobs, and the jobs never came somehow. I don't know. Somehow everyone seems to know that we're formerly incarcerated, and they're not hiring us, even though they're not supposed to know that. So they said, you know what? Let's create our own. Let's create a worker-owned company. What company? What sector are we going to go in? It turns out the state had just instituted commercial food waste composting as a mandatory requirement for like all food enterprises above a certain size. So like most restaurants, grocery stores, they have to send their food waste to composting. They said, let's start a composting. Like this is going to be a new sector, a new business springing up in Massachusetts. Let's do this and make it a worker-owned thing. And we're going to raise. We're all formally incarcerated. Where are we going to get the startup capital for this? Oh, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to use those same hidden dark arts of the Securities Act of 1933, and we're going to use that to raise our startup capital for Cerro. This is like the third truck that they've bought. They're now doing the commercial food waste hauler for Northeastern University, and I believe Boston College. They're on track to get more of the universities and hospital systems in Boston. They were the first, and they were also the first borrower from the Boston Ujima project. So what is the Boston Ujima project? After they raised the capital for Cerro, they realized, hey, these investors we got into Cerro, I think we can build a movement with them. And we're going to start to not just invest in one business, but maybe all the businesses in the neighborhood that we want. Oh, you know what? Not just Roxbury, but all Roxbury, Dorchester, Jamaica Plain, East Boston eventually, all the working class communities of Boston, working class communities of color in Boston said, let's get together and what are we going to do? We're going to pool investment dollars from all these places, and we're going to have the working class community members of Boston, we're going to vote on everything. We're going to vote on what kinds of businesses we want. We're going to vote on the eligibility of those businesses as Ujima Business Alliance members. And we're going to vote on each investment. So each investment, they've invested $1 million so far. And this is crazy. So this is their capital structure. Now, let me pause here and also say, they originally thought maybe let's be a credit union, have federal deposit insurance to cover some of these low interest investments. But unfortunately right now, if you are a new credit union, the National Credit Union Administration will not let you do small business lending, which is what they wanted to do. So they said, all right, screw it, we're going to figure out something else. And so this is what they figured out eventually with the lawyers and the bankers and the people that they knew. And they have this structure. So at the very top, those are the notes sold to community members, non-accredited investors who live in neighborhoods of Dorchester, Roxbury, and Jamaica Plain. And then there's accredited notes for non-accredited investors who don't live in those neighborhoods, notes for accredited investors, so these are now wealthy investors, NEA notes for philanthropic investors, so those foundations, you buy the NEA notes, and then you can also donate to the Loan Loss Reserve, because they do know about loan loss reserves out there, and they're raising money for it. And one of the cool things about this structure is also, it's not quite apparent here, but the way they've set up the notes and the agreements, the philanthropic investors are the first loss capital, right? And then the accredited investors, and then the non-accredited investors outside of the neighborhoods, so that, okay, it's not federally insured deposits, but it's pretty kind of close, or at least that's what we're trying to simulate with this structure, okay? Cerro, I mentioned Cerro was their first investment. Their largest investment so far is $250,000 equity investment in Jazz Urbane Cafe. They're going to go into this, it's a 2-story space at the bottom of this building, historic furniture building, now being turned into Jazz Urbane Cafe. And the co-founders they all ties to the neighborhood. They either live in the neighborhood or they worked in the neighborhood. They're running other restaurants in the neighborhood, and they're like, we want the neighborhood to be a co-owner of this restaurant with us. And since we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we don't have to do our own Securities Act raise. We're just going to go straight to Boston Ujima. And they had to go twice. The first time they went through the voting process, the voters were like, I don't think you're ready yet. Second time, they did it. And so now they just got all their permits to start the renovation for this. All right. Which is all to say, is any of these models better than the other? I don't know. They all have different constraints, legal things. EB-PREC is a California-specific kind of cooperative. The Community Investment Trust requires some revenue already in the property. But I mean, it's really all only one model. It's really only one model. Find a conversation about what the community wants. And if any bankers, lawyers, investors, developers, or planners, or elected officials refuse to support that vision, just kick them out and find someone that will. Because I mean, look at this. Look, this is some crazy shit, right? Isn't this wild? How many more cities do I need to show you before you believe me when I say, if they won't support the community vision, just kick them out. Find someone that will. That's really it, right? How many years does it have to be in operation before I can convince you? Community-owned and controlled real estate and finance can work. How many models do you need to see? Honestly, it's all this. I know it's kind of crazy. Like, I write about all these and I get excited talking about them. It's hard to contain, because I was supposed to give up, have more time for questions and stuff, and I'll be staying all night. I can talk about this all night. Noni knows. We did it last night. There's really only one model. Start with the community vision, and I would recommend going to where they're already talking about it. It might be a barber shop, it might be a church. You don't have to start the conversation. It's already happening. Again, I don't know how many cities I need to show you before I can convince you. It's already happening somewhere, and you just got to find it and go there. You might be one of these things. You might be a lawyer or a banker or a developer or a planner or an elected official or an economic development authority professional, wherever you are. Just go there and see who else is in the room. And if it's one of these other pieces you're missing, just bring them in, talk about it. Find the vision, find the conversation about what the community wants and go forward with it. And if anyone says, no, this isn't going to work, kick them out. But also, I would caution you by saying, have realistic expectations. You heard this morning. It's supposed to be hard. It's going to be hard. That's what it feels like when you're working against the grain, right? You're working against those 4,200 community banks that I mentioned. Every single one of those 4,230 community banks, they will all tell you, we lend based on relationships and trust and who we know. Every single community bank will tell you, we lend to who we know. How many of those banks are owned by or led by people of color? 4,230 community banks. How many? I counted last week, it's 122, right? So there are 4,100 community banks that you are working against. And like I mentioned earlier, commercial real estate is a big thing for community banks. And what's the next large source for commercial real estate lending? The regional banks. How many of those are led by people of color? I don't have to tell you, it's zero. What's the next largest source of capital for commercial real estate? The commercial mortgage-backed securities market, the private debt market. 99% professionally managed assets in the U.S. are managed by white male-owned firms. All right? So this is all just to say, this is what you're working against. Not only the history of disinvestment that leaves so many of these properties in tatters that have to get rehabbed and subsidized somehow. You're working against the still operating capital of commercial real estate that You know who most of the owners look like, and it's no wonder, it's no surprise. Like, oh, SBA lending, big small business support, right? 60,000 SBA loans a year. How many go to black-owned businesses? 5%. How many go to Hispanic-owned businesses? 8%. How many go to women-owned businesses? 18%. SBA loans, big commercial real estate financing for small business. But a lot of it works through community banks and regional banks, and I just told you who they know. They can tell you who they know. It's pretty obvious. So again, you're working against the grain. It's going to take a long time, not just because of the history, but because of everything else in the conventional models. Everybody else has this thing that's like, it's easier to do it the other way, to just ignore the history and the existing structures and just to like let the market have its way. But the market is rigged, and we can talk about why. And trust me, like I said, look, someone out there is working on something just as crazy as your thing, or crazier, I guarantee you. And if you think your thing is crazier than any of this, please email me immediately. Well, email me on January 2nd, 2024 when I'm back from book leave. But yeah, if just in case. You can email me immediately, but you'll get a response that I'm on book leave. And with that, I think we're going to have to stop there. We have like 2 minutes left for questions from Ishmael if he wants to get up here. Yeah.
Ooh, that was tight. Okay, we're gonna do. Yeah. Well, actually, I wanted to first again thank you again, Oscar, for that and for coming out and for your presentation. And I think I will try my best to do some threading through some of the upcoming panels, and I'll give a little teaser to the next panel and sort of thinking about some of the reflections that we just heard from you all. In the interest of time, I actually want to just see and if there is anyone in the audience that has a question for Oscar. We're going to do some adjustments with sort of our schedule. We're going to go a little bit more on this piece before we move into the next panel. We're going to decrease the time for a break that we'll have, and then we will obviously have opportunity after it's all wrapped up for folks to keep chatting. But anybody want to ask a question? Yeah, and just like big projection.
Yeah, I have a question because it feels like when people are trying to figure out how to launch these projects, they're like regular people, everyday people. Maybe they're mothers or vendors or I don't know, a doctor, and they need lawyers and city leaders and technical experts, seemingly, to launch. So it's curious to me, like, how that alchemy works and how many of the projects, with the back of the envelope estimation, really actually were able to ground like everyday people into the visioning, the leadership, and as the vehicle for the project, as opposed to, not to downgrade, projects that were started by cities or consultants, and then community voice was folded in after the fact. So curious about that challenge and tension.
So I'm trying to make sure I hear you correctly. So you're asking about like, how is it possible for folks who are on the ground to pull in these experts?
You're talking about direction, right?
How do the folks on the ground lead into their future when there's such a heavy technical lift necessary? And I'm noticing in my experience there are a lot of consultants who are paid $180,000 to lead a process that then in name is a community process, versus how community members are skilled up or skilled themselves up to lead their process and then fold in the technical and expert resources to lead their vision.
Can I get you to restate the question into the mic so the people
I'll restate it. Yeah, I think so. I think I'm hearing you talk about sort of directionality. And so when we talk about a community-driven or community-led process, you're talking about the balance of a process that is initiated, run, managed by public sector, city. You're mentioning consulting, where there's a heavy technical need to launch efforts like this, where then community are folded in afterwards, compared to what percentage or what does it look like for efforts where community are, you said, skilled up or equipped themselves to be able to be more self-determining about who and when gets folded in on a technical support or otherwise.
We're asking about the tension or the...
I think are you asking about how often are you seeing that community-led?
Asking about the tension of folks wanting to scale
Yeah.
this, right?
Yeah, I guess what you're making me think about is, yeah, there once upon a time, or it's not once upon a time, it's still like the standard model is, here's a big property, let's issue an RFP, let's pay somebody to be the community engagement facilitator and bring them in, and maybe they come up with something really interesting. And maybe there's a community benefit agreement attached to the project. But I'm seeing a lot of those, or the biggest ones, really fail spectacularly. Like one of the first big community benefit agreements was negotiated as the Kingsbridge Armory in the Bronx. This is like a massive 500,000 former National Guard armory. You know, these things are in a lot of cities. And a bunch of former New York Rangers and some real estate folks got together and said, we're going to turn this armory into an ice rink in the Bronx. And we're gonna give the jobs and construction and service jobs and everything to the community. And actually the community, good faith, got involved, and they negotiated a pretty significant community benefit agreement about 10 years ago. But that developer partnership fell apart over the past 10 years, and the city is starting over. They started over, and they did another community engagement process, and that's where that is. In Chicago, you're seeing the Obama Library situation, where there's all kinds of fighting over, let's have a community benefit agreement, and Barack Obama at the time said, well, who is the community? And everyone was like, well, didn't you run for president based on your knowledge of this community? But it didn't happen. But so I mean, and they were still working on that on the south side of Chicago. Yeah, these top-down things are still out there, and the impetus is there, and there's these big projects, and I guess the thing is, I don't write about them because they're not that interesting, and they don't seem to go anywhere. I haven't seen one go anywhere. You know, even these things, they're not going like that far. We're talking one property, two properties, maybe three, but they're going somewhere, and that's what's interesting to me. Yeah.
Thanks, Oscar. No? Okay. I was going to just say a response to your response and to that question. And I think something that I've been curious about over the course of the morning and your presentation and even your question is around roles of different sectors and the ways in which partnerships can be formed. And I think I really appreciate the perspective you've given of how to just completely go against the grain, and because of all of sort of historical precedents. And I'm curious as we go through the day to hear from other sectors and perspectives where we do have a major banker, we do have public sector representatives having to ask themselves, how do they participate, or what role do they play? Or is their role to step aside? And so
definitely don't. I wouldn't say step aside. I would say step to the back of the room. Be in the room. Sit down and listen. That's how we end up with all this. I mean, maybe Noni can tell us a little bit. We'll hear from Noni later about like what it was like at the beginning of EB Prec when he walked into the room with Janelle Orsi and just and say, "What's going on?" And Janelle sits there and listens, and she happens to have an answer for you. Doesn't always happen that quickly. Sometimes it takes longer. You know, when the E.G. Wood folks got to their lawyer, Fatima was like, I don't know, this is crazy, but let's try it out. She's a lawyer. She's barred in Illinois and several other states. She's got a career. She's got other clients, and they found the lawyer that was like, all right, let's do this. I'm going to sit here. I'll sit here first and listen. You know, that's what lawyers do have to listen first. And then she's like, okay, let's do this. So if for the bankers, the planners, the public officials, go to these places. You know, the Africatown Community Land Trust or other groups similar along those lines. I mean, the Cultural Space Agency is connected to a lot of these folks now, and I know in the region, and just a lot of them have regular meetings in South Park, where the El Barrio Community Land Trust is forming. You know, there's that little events space on that second floor of the building above the pizza shop. I can't remember I'm blanking out on what it's called, but what's that? South Park Hall, yes, exactly, South Park Hall. You can go to South Park Hall is it every month or every quarter? There's like an artist show. What do you think they're talking about in these artist shows? They're talking about their community. They're talking about what they want to see or what they hope to see or what they used to have and what they want to have now, what it could be. What do you think artists talk about? Just go, hang out, make some friends. And you know what? One of them will eventually say, hey, we've got this crazy idea. We just need, like, you know, a small loan or whatever. They'll come to you with the deal because they know you. Just build a relationship, and don't do it where they are. Go to them. You don't have to always do it, have them come to you.
I think that's a reflection. I think about that all the time, and about being in space and being in community, and even talking about the pilot this morning of, you know, having to be limited to being online and much of our engagement. I think a major difference, it would have been the amount of opportunity to have been in space, but you know, as folks mentioned, being able to champion some of those relationships that we already had. So, okay, I think in the interest of time, we're gonna close out the keynote here. Oh, Jackie. Ask your question. We're going to do the same thing. Ask your question, and if I can loop it all back in, 5 gold stars to the moderator.
Awesome, thank you. Hi, Oscar. I actually had the pleasure of seeing you facilitate a panel at the Just Economy conference. It was about banking. I got fired up in ways that I did not expect to get fired up. And I've had this question. I work for the city of Seattle. In thinking, what is the role of municipal governments in helping diversify financing options for folks and bringing back community banks and growing the number of community banks that actually serve people in our areas? What role can we play since so much of that is influenced by federal policy?
Yeah, that was
In like a minute.
Yeah, in a minute. What is the role? I don't know. I think that's another one of those, like, go to the room where people are talking about the future of these communities, go to those rooms, sit there, and the role will, I don't want to say magically, but no, sometimes it'll just magically appear to you, be like, oh, we have a funny thing that can fit that. Oh, here's an example, like in Boston, one of these neighborhoods, the neighborhood wanted a former hot dog factory to be converted into something else that would give them jobs. And somebody in the room working for the city was like, oh, you know what? There's this thing called Section 108 of the HUD Community Development Block Grant Program, where you can use your city's annual allocation of community development block grants as a loan guarantee for a low-interest loan. Boom, 10 years later, community owns the Commonwealth Kitchen. Community owns shared kitchen space, commercial kitchen area. There's like a fleet of food trucks that are based at this thing in this neighborhood, where like 50% of people who work at this thing walk to work. You know, it wasn't magical, but it was just like, you're in the room, you know something, and everyone else is trying to push through some kind of community vision, and you know, trust in the magic of like those things overlapping at some point. Yeah. I don't always know what the, but I love hearing about it when it happens.
Thank you very much, Oscar, for your time. Appreciate you.
Thanks, everyone.